Another edition of Riding Home. Couple of announcements. First, big weekend recruiting. Matt and I are going to talk about that. Well, Matt and everybody's going to talk about that in a second. Ryan and I will be at Paloma Park from 4 to 7. We've got a special guest that we're planning to be there during the 4 o'clock hour, and then that person has to leave. But a huge weekend. We're going to talk about everything right now. Another edition of Riding Home. Matt, Auburn and Georgia. Let's start with the recruiting weekend. I know you touched on this a lot on the site as well as on these videos, but this is not the only big game of the year, but it's one of the two.
Absolutely. Going into this season, it was either going to be, the Auburn game or the Tennessee game. And I still expect a lot of guys to be there for that Tennessee game, but plenty of 5-stars in multiple classes, a couple big official visitors, one a 5-star edge defender, another a big-time running back from California making the trip. Jordan Hall, big defensive lineman from Jacksonville's in town. At least half of the current commitments have told me they're going to be in town. A lot of 2024 guys, a lot of guys in the 25 class. So I know a lot of people who cover recruiting most just care about this current cycle, but there are a lot of guys who are going to be making plays for the Dogs in the future that are going to be in town this weekend. So overall, massive recruiting weekend, and just another reason, or an opportunity, I guess, for the staff to impress these official visitors and continue to close this.
All right, and this is always a huge social weekend in Athens. Yeah. How is everybody buzzing about that right now, Ryan?
Yeah, you get a bunch of emails. Oh, it's Beat Week. It's Beat Auburn Week. I remember a couple of years ago they used to have, they would give out T-shirts and things like that. Haven't seen that as much, but I think, I've been on campus a little bit this week, and there's definitely a good atmosphere. I know there's a lot of people coming through town, Auburn people, all sorts of people that normally wouldn't come to Athens. So it is a big weekend. I mean, this is one of Georgia's, 3 or 4 traditional rivals.
There's only 3. There's only 3 traditional rivals.
Well,
it's not that hard to.
Big deal. A lot of people want to be in Athens this weekend. 3:30, CBS kick. It's no matter how good these teams are, this game matters a lot.
Okay. Hey, listen, when you order DAWGSTRUCTION, you're getting a shirt from our friends at Red Zone included in the packaging. Hey, make sure you get this. You get the shirt for yourself, but you need to email me. We've already had people taking advantage of this. Our friends at Red Zone have been awesome this season. Scott and Mindy downtown. They will not be that far from Paloma Park, where we will be on Friday again. If you want to pick it up, you can go to Red Zone. You can go to Red Zone. They've got it on display. Or you can pick it up down below. But if you pick it up down below, you need to make sure to send me your shirt size. I'm actually going to try to get, well, that's not going to work as well as I'd like, men. But I'm going to show you the display at Red Zone just real quick, because I know Matt was wondering about it. There. So when you go inside, you see there, Matt, you can go right in. They have all sorts of baby stuff too, for people who have just had children, for people who are going through just having children. Uh-oh, that's not so good. Now, here we go. Georgia, Auburn. Where are we at with this game? I mean, I think the Dogs are probably, everybody's kind of sleeping on them now because of the struggle they had against Missouri. And now they're lumping in the Kent State thing in too, which I think is a little bit, I wouldn't confuse those two things. I was listening to Ralph Russo on, he's the lead college sports reporter for the AP, Matt. He was talking about how he has no concerns about Georgia at all. Reese Davis says he has no concerns about Georgia at all. Both those guys were on Paul Feinbaum's show. Do you have concerns about Georgia, those of us who cover it on an everyday basis?
Not this weekend. I still think that they are one of the best teams in college football, and I think they're going to make a deep run. But Auburn they're not that great. They played a solid first half against LSU, but 4 turnovers in that game, 3 in the fourth quarter. They've got some talent, and they've got some quality defenders, and they've got a young quarterback, Robbie Ashford, who can make some plays. But his big plays come when he's scrambling out of the pocket and kind of doing his own thing there. So if Georgia can keep him in the pocket and force him to make plays with his arm, he's going to make some mistakes. I think, again, Auburn's not coming into Athens and beating this team 3:30, one of the biggest home games of the year. This is a big deal. And after a game against Missouri where they did not look like the number one team, I expect them to come out fast, aggressive, get points on the board, and I expect them to have a good game. Are they going to win by 30 points? I don't think so. That's just a lot of points. But I do think they're going to win the game convincingly. I'm not sure it's going to be a game in the fourth quarter.
Ryan?
As far as throughout the entire year, I think you can maybe be a little bit concerned about the Dogs. But that's if you're comparing it to last year. If you're comparing it to other years, there's, this is kind of on par. They're in the mix to be in the playoff. I think they're championship contenders. I think winning the national championship is not crazy to say. I still think that they're certainly one of the handful of teams that has the capability of doing that this year. As far as this week goes, not really concerned. I did think that Georgia was going to go into Columbia last week and destroy Missouri. And that not being the case did not change my feelings about them beating Auburn this week convincingly. In fact, it kind of enforces that because I think they'll be motivated. Last night, Karis Jackson used the word embarrassed as a phrase he would describe his feelings during the Missouri game. But whatever the situation is, whether it's a close game or a big game, don't see Auburn coming in and beating Georgia. Robbie Ashford's never had to deal with that. If you ask certain people, Robbie Ashford should be playing college baseball and not college football. So very young, not super young, but inexperienced quarterback, especially at this level, especially in these environments.
This is his first road start, Matt, in the SEC. Well, just period in college football. He threw for over 300 yards for Auburn against LSU. Now, some of that was against busted coverages. But he's uber athletic.
Yeah.
Kirby's talked about that this week. I was on radio with Birmingham, WJOX earlier this week. And it's asking a lot for Auburn, I think, to come in and win this game. And then I want to get Matt's comments on this because he and I have not talked about this yet. No, we did talk about this briefly, actually, now that I think about it. This comment, Matt, from Auburn center Brandon Council, I don't care what he's saying. This guy is very smart. This is his 7th year of college. Ryan, why can't you do that? This is what he had to say, the Auburn starting center, Brandon Council. He said, Georgia has got some interior stunts that kind of hinders the run game, but we're going to start off fast. If you start off fast, run the ball on them, keep them out of third down packages, really, we could demolish them. I personally believe up front. Matt?
It's easy to say when Jalen Carter is not 100%. He does make things incredibly difficult for every offensive lineman they go up against, and he makes the guys around him better too. So losing him or being without him does hurt. But, I mean, Missouri had, 2 solid runs against Georgia? Other than that, it was 2 yards, 3 yards, no yards. So it's not like teams are running on Georgia at will, and they didn't necessarily run against LSU that well either.
No.
So I don't know exactly where he's getting this from, but Missouri watched some tape and they felt good about what they were doing defensively. Maybe Auburn's watched, some tape and they feel like they can exploit Georgia. But I think Georgia's offensive line is going to come ready to play. That's been a unit that everyone has kind of been criticizing the last 2 weeks, especially last week against Missouri. So I expect them to come out and, play with some fire under their butt and be physical and aggressive, everything that Kirby Smart wants. Discipline, composure, physicality, that's what he preaches to this team. And I think the offensive line is ready to prove some doubters wrong and get after it.
Georgia's offensive line.
Yeah, I think I kind of switched that up a little bit. But, again, going back to him playing center, I mean, it's going to be tough for them to do what they want against Georgia's front seven. They're not the same group they were last year, but
Auburn's not played a road game this year.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough for them. They barely beat San Jose State. I mean,
Oh, Matt jumped out. Something happened with Matt. Go ahead there, Ryan. I can't hear. It's okay, Matt. I can't hear you, Matt. Though. Go ahead, Ryan.
It's just your last sentence. You didn't hear it. But as far as what Brandon Council's his name, right?
Yes.
What he said. I mean, The offensive line was what I was more concerned. If we're talking about specifically last week and maybe the last couple of weeks, I think it's Georgia's offensive line that's maybe been more of an issue. People have been criticizing it, and rightfully so. I can't remember the exact number, but I think Stetson Bennett was pressured sometime somewhere in the teens, close to 20 times, something like that.
Okay.
That affects accuracy.
Oh,
That
no,
affects
listen, man,
decision.
Stetson, that was a challenging game for Stetson.
Yes. And
Go
it
ahead.
was, I thought that they put on a good show as far as the environment goes there. I thought it was pretty loud. It was cold. It's an SEC road game. But the defensive line, yeah, like Matt said, when Jalen Carter's not out there, when one of the best players in college football is not out there, it does make that easier to say because that's the guy that will be lining up against him. But it's just, here and there against Kent State and against Missouri, because that's kind of what people are focusing on right now as far as Georgia goes, and not the 3 games before where they destroyed everybody. If we're just talking about those 2 games, then the defensive line didn't really give up that much. It was just like, a play here, a play there, where a play broke, and how many of those led to touchdowns? 1 or 2 over 2 games. So, and no rush. I don't think there was a rushing touchdown on it. Am I mistaken?
Against Georgia?
Against Georgia, has there been a rushing touchdown in the last 2 weeks? Did Kent State rush for a touchdown?
South Carolina scored in the passing game.
Missouri.
Missouri did not score a rushing touchdown.
Malachi Stark saved that.
Yeah.
So the one real chance you had, you got ran down. So, but that's that play is kind of an outlier. But Georgia's front seven, no, not as good as last year, especially.
Georgia has allowed 1 rushing touchdown. That had to have been against.
Was it Oregon? Oh no, Oregon
didn't score a touchdown. I mean, I kind of this entire conversation proves how stupid some of this is. I mean, going back to the Auburn, let's just say Georgia's playing someone else. I mean, but you know what? No, Auburn has not had more than 110 yards rushing in a Power 5 game this year. Georgia is permitting 89 yards rushing. Only Illinois and Georgia have permitted 1 touchdown on the ground this season. I think to pivot back to the criticism of Georgia, which we do plenty of here. I don't know if it's this is really going to sound like a Georgia fan right now, and I don't mean it that way, but maybe I'm not recalling the Alabama part of the discussion after they played so poorly against Texas, but I mean, really, that many people are watching Georgia play Mizzou? I mean, that Alabama game was on Fox with Texas. 10 million people watched that game. And I know that the ESPN folks said that was the 2nd most streamed game in SEC network history. And all of a sudden, everybody's talking about how poorly Georgia's played. I'm like, well, bitch, are you watching them play or are you just going by the score? Because normally people just go by the score. I've watched Clemson play all but their game against NC State. They've not looked good. Penn State, they've not looked good. I think I correctly diagnosed that Oklahoma sucks, and now they're out of the top 25. So it is kind of, when you're at the top, as Kirby would say, the wind blows harder, no doubt about it. But I just find it curious that so many people have been watching Georgia lately, and yet they've not been on, traditional television. They've been on the SEC network. I don't know. I watch a lot of games, and I watched LSU and Auburn play last week, and it was not great football by either side. That said, I'm not surprised that LSU won the game because Auburn just continues to make mistakes when you just really don't want to. Anyway, I'm just rambling now. Go ahead. Someone pick it up. Someone pick me up here.
Yeah. No, I think, again, Auburn does have some talent, but they don't have as much talent as Georgia. They're not as deep as Georgia. They don't have the coaching staff, and I think that's their biggest problem. Other than Christian Robinson, one of the best assistants in the conference, big dog post guy.
Really pushing other than
here. I like Christian. But no, outside of him, I'm not really impressed with the staff that they put together, and that's a tough job. And again, they haven't played well. They're going to have to play their A game, and I think they're going to give it because.
But Mizzou played their A game, and Mizzou played their A game and lost. Yeah. Matt, I mean,
yeah,
I guess
they played really good football for 3 quarters, and Georgia still won the game, playing just one fantastic fourth quarter and stole that away from them.
One other thing, real quickly, y'all. Ryan, there's only in 5 games the opposition has only attempted 129 rushes against Georgia.
Because they're
So
playing down.
they're what now?
That's because they're usually playing from behind.
Well, I mean, it's just a factual statement that they've only defended the run 129 times. Only Missouri, Minnesota, James Madison, Miami have defended fewer runs than Georgia. Tennessee's right there too, by the way, on that front. But like if you're Auburn, they're just not dependable, I think is the biggest thing right now. I mean, when we talk,
they're not consistent. Yeah.
correct. And they're almost averaging 400 yards a game. That's a lot. Georgia's averaging 520 offensively. Go ahead.
I mean, as far as the run game goes, Auburn's got one of the most talented backfields in the country.
No question.
When talk about Tank Bisbee and Jacques Hunter. That is a very powerful duo that brings different things to the table. We watched them last year not do too much against Georgia. Different front seven.
But dude, they're not doing anything against anybody right now.
Yeah, that's the whole point. And
they're 66th in the country in the run game.
Them coming into Athens and just pounding it on them. If that's the conversation. Going back to what you were saying about people watching Georgia, like why are you watching that SEC stream? There is a little bit of a target. They are the defending national champions. That creates a little bit more interest. That creates even people that don't even necessarily care about the SEC that much. Well, this is the defending champions. Let's check them out. So they're a topic of discussion, and that's part of why they watch. And they look at that score, 4 to Missouri, and they think, well, they're not that great, and maybe they aren't. We'll find out. But I don't think that's the case. But you can't, we talked about it a little bit the other day. You can't just look at that. Texas is not good. You can't see, and that was a noon game. You can't just look at that and be like, oh, well, Alabama didn't have a really hard time with Texas. Texas should have won that game.
Yeah.
And
could you really say that about the Missouri game? No, I don't think so.
Ohio State had a struggle fest with Notre Dame. Notre Dame's not anything special. No. So these other teams, Michigan, I can't remember who they struggled against, but they struggled against somebody.
Well, I think the thing to me, Matt, that's a little bit, I didn't necessarily expect this. I knew Georgia had a wide margin of error, but I thought it was a little wider than it turned out to be, because when you go and you struggle at Missouri, the Kent State game, like, I don't want to hear about that shit. I mean, they had 4 turnovers, a 3-turnover, negative turnover day. I mean, just they won that game by 17 points. Let's kind of chill out on the Kent State deal. It's the Missouri game is a different conversation. But again, I get the criticism. This group criticizes Georgia probably more than anybody, I would imagine. I don't know that anybody, that non-hater criticism. Yeah, I mean, we criticize them, right? Wouldn't you say? Am I missing?
Not according to the comments.
Well, you can't.
Well, I don't know what everyone else says. But.
Well, listen, we're just telling the truth.
Right.
Like and most of the truth is pretty positive when it comes to this team.
I mean, but you can't. I mean, it is what have you done for me lately, Matt? And Georgia has not blown Oregon out lately. They've not blown South Carolina out lately. Lately, they beat Missouri by 4 on the road in a knife fight in Columbia. But when Ohio State escapes, I don't even know, Purdue, wherever, or loses to Purdue, like they do every now and then, that doesn't mean Ohio State can't win the national championship. They got their ass beat by 2 touchdowns by Virginia Tech in 2014 on the road and won the national championship. These are moments in time.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to figure out this Georgia team. 3 weeks ago, they were the clear #1 team in the country, an absolute buzzsaw. No one's touching them. And now
they were better than last year. Georgia was better than last year. And Trevor Lawrence was never going to lose a football game. This is type of stupid stuff that people say.
Well, I'm still on the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon.
Well, he lost a few. I don't want to. The
Bowl.
Update here is he lost a couple of football games while he was at Clemson. That's my point. Is that we get out of control with some of this stuff. Georgia's better than last year. No, they're not. They're not.
Yeah, and we saw that last week, and we'll see what do we get the Georgia that demolished Oregon and South Carolina when Auburn comes to town, or do they kind of struggle out the gates for a quarter or two? Just interested to see how they, I guess, bounce back from a game where they faced some adversity last week on the road.
They're not two different teams. They're the same team. This is
Right.
and I'm not necessarily accusing you of this, but there's an oversimplification by folks that do what we do for a living. There's good Bo and bad Bo. No, Bo Nix just is good. He's just what he is. And like he can't do what he wants to do against Georgia because Georgia is really good on defense. What he's done against everybody else is score like a zillion points. I did not see who Oregon played last week. I know they won. But like it's like we get to the point with those of us who do this for a living where it has to be either black or white, and there's just very little nuance. Part of that's because we're speaking now in 30-second intervals. But the truth is that Ohio State, to me, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama look like the best three teams in the country. Clemson played a lot better last week than they have the entire year. To me, that suggests that they're getting better. Michigan, I mean, I don't know, y'all. I mean, I can't tell with Michigan. Or Iowa's just not great. They should beat them. And then, like with SC, I've watched SC. I thought their win, Ryan, at Oregon State was a big deal. I'm not hating on them for that. I thought that was a trap over there. And then Oklahoma State, I don't know enough about Oklahoma State to really say, but
No, and listen, we're not even halfway through the regular season, so some of these things will change in a couple of weeks. Some of these conversations, but
of course they will.
There's probably some sort of medium between the way Georgia played at Missouri compared to the way they played against Oregon. They are capable of both of those games, but it's just a matter of did they show up and execute? And that's probably, around that might be similar terminology to what Kirby would use, but they didn't execute properly for the majority of the Missouri game, and really maybe like 60% of the game, because in the third quarter is when they started to pick it up. But they are capable of blowing out teams like Oregon and having a near perfect offensive showout.
This was very similar to the way they played offensively at Missouri, which was the Florida game last year. They didn't play well. You know what the difference was? The defense. They were going into the half. Was it 3-0 or like?
They went into the half. The last 2 minutes of the second quarter was when they had the two big touchdowns.
I believe they scored 21 points or something like that in the last 2 minutes of the game. Well, would people be talking? I mean, so it's really about what you do. How do you play? Again, we get back to this all the time. How do you play? The result is important because it can determine your future. But how do you play? And they did not play well in the first half. Missouri did, by the way. Missouri did not play well in the second half, probably because Georgia played better. They executed better. They didn't execute perfectly still, but I think Georgia. I've talked myself into. I do think they will cover this line now. All of a sudden, I was jumpy about the Kent State line. Excuse me, I was jumpy about the South Carolina line, and they pushed on through with that deal. But I'm going to take them. It sounds like y'all are not. Are there other games we should be watching this week? We've got Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Alabama. Matt.
Yeah, I mean, is this the first time that Red River, was it shootout or showdown, whatever they're calling
Red River rivalry?
Neither team's ranked.
Oh, you missed
Red River rivalry. Yeah.
Yeah, you missed the
neither
90s
one's ranked, right?
when
I just think it's crazy.
you missed the 90s when these teams weren't good at all. But yes, it's been a while since they've not been. But dude, listen, it ain't working at Oklahoma right now. Comments?
No, and I mean, they don't matter right now. They're not ranked. Maybe when they get it together, they can be relevant. We could talk about them again. But a team that is relevant right now is Tennessee. Really looking forward to see how they play against LSU, who has crept back into the top 25. Now I think they're at 25 or 24. noon game out there. If the Vols are the team that we think they might be, they need to win that game convincingly on the road and show, the country that, hey, they're kind of back a little bit. If you can go on the road and beat an LSU team that is starting to play a little better. They still didn't play great against Auburn, but they played better since that collapse against Florida State. So I'm looking forward to watching that one at noon.
Hey, Ryan, I don't think Tennessee has to win convincingly. I think they have to win. I don't. And on the road in this league, hold on one second. I couldn't hear you. You do not at Tiger Stadium in particular in Death Valley. You just get out of there alive. Go ahead, Ryan.
If Tennessee were to go in there at 11 in the morning and win convincingly, I'd be pretty impressed. That would be probably one of the more impressive things I think we'd see this weekend. I do think they win that game, but I think they struggle a little bit. Yeah, look, they struggled. Was their game against the Gators at home or was it in Gainesville?
It was in Knoxville.
It was in Knoxville.
That was a struggle fest.
Well, Tennessee,
just
real quick, Tennessee had that overtime win over Pitt, that's not getting better up there.
Just got beat by
Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Jeff Collins lists Georgia Tech. But I do think Tennessee is a good team. I think Mississippi State is looking better. Kentucky, Ryan and I sat there and watched them completely just take the game, gift wrap it, and hand it to Ole Miss. Here you go. You want to talk about bad? That was bad. I mean, Kentucky now, them one in the East, they're going to have to, obviously, no matter what, I think would have had to beat Georgia anyway. But now they got to beat Georgia and Tennessee. I just don't know,
And I think a couple of things would have to play in their favor that way still.
Well, they're still okay to get to Atlanta and beyond. I mean, they can still win the national championship, Kentucky. But like Clemson has nearly cleared out their division, because Florida State, I think, has a loss or two. No, they only have one loss to Wake Forest. So you could have a Wheel of Destiny situation in the ACC. But Kentucky, Kentucky's still okay, but when you can't give games away. Do y'all buy Mississippi really being relevant in the West? Because Arkansas is falling apart.
Somewhat relevant. I think Mississippi State is a better team than I think most people thought. But Kentucky, Will Levis has to play better. This is apparently this guy who could be a number 1 overall pick. Yeah. Every time I watch him, he's not playing very well. He just doesn't seem to have that that winning X factor mentality to him. He's got a great arm, but he's just not playing good football. So I right now it looks like Tennessee is going to be Georgia's biggest test. But that game in Starkville, I think, could be a really, really tough matchup.
Yeah. That game could be really interesting. That Will Rogers might throw it 60 times against Georgia. So it's definitely a different type of matchup, especially out there with all that ringing.
You're going to experience it for yourself, and they have more people than they did the last time I went out there in 10. But that's not like Missouri was about what you're going to see. So Georgia's already seen it. The cowbell thing. I mean, to me, noise is noise. I don't know. I did want to give the both of you just a very quick chance to talk about A, your Falcons, and the B, your Braves.
You want to go, Ryan?
I could take the Falcons. You could have.
Oh, wonderful. Go ahead.
Kind of good. They're not awful. I'm not a Mariota believer.
They're not awful.
I don't think. Look, they're not awful. They should be 3-1. They could be 4-0. But they're 2-2. They're tied for first in the NFC South, and I know no one listening really cares about that. But they're pretty good. Cordero Patterson being out for at least a month does not help.
No, it's
not good. That's right. I'm not impressed with a home victory over an injury-ridden Cleveland Browns team. Glad they won the game. That's usually a game that the Falcons would lose, last year, 2 years ago, and they still should have beat the Saints. But I mean, what if you do? You're 2-2.
Stop hating, man.
But Braves are gonna run it back. I'm hoping. I'm pulling for the Falcons. I'm just not believing in them, but I do believe in the Bravos. They're gonna run through this. They're gonna go back to back. 5 straight division titles. Let's go. The championship runs through Smyrna. Said it all year, and let's go do it. I'm pumped.
I mean, Smyrna is, I'm trying to think of the DeKalb County equivalent, like Clarkston, or I just, ugh.
I'm gonna get in trouble when you start saying these towns, and I'm
No, yeah,
say something dumb here,
we
but
should stay away from geography with Matt on the. I
that's
was the 1989 Brockett Elementary School Geography B champion. Just in case
congratulations.
just in case you were wondering at home. Um, Look, I watched the end of the Braves. I thought it was impressive. I don't know the first thing about baseball at all. But unfortunately, for the Mets, they are losers. And
Always have been.
and
Always
now they're
have been.
pissed. Now they're pissed at the Phillies, I guess, because of the Phillies getting in. I'm a little confused with that. Dude, that trip out there was so sort of taxing, you know. Um, Everything, you fly in, got there late. The food was not great Friday night, which was very disappointing because I'd eaten in a particular way so we could have a big meal. And then when we got to Columbia, they did not have our hotel room, which is kind of the point of having the reservation. The game was a lot more competitive than I thought, but these things happen, and you do have to survive in college football. Talking about Mississippi State, I'm reminded of that Alabama game when they somehow beat Mississippi State when they were trailing with like 2 minutes to go or something crazy, and Alabama survived that thing. But a big recruiting weekend, a big social weekend. We'll be at Paloma Park 4 to 7, and you can watch
Friday.
us Friday, and you can watch us live on this streaming on this streaming channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see y'all at the game.